জনক জননী দ্বৈত তনয় প্রভু গুরুপতি তুহু সর্বময় ভকতি বিনোদ কহে শুনকান রাধানাথ তুহু আমারো পরাণ রাধানাথ তুহু আমারো পরাণ মানস দেহ গেহ যো কিছু অর্পিলু তুয়া পদে নন্দ কিশোর মানস দেহ গেহ যো কিছু অর্পিলু তুয়া পদে নন্দ কিশোর মানস দেহ মানস দেহ গেহ যো কিছু অর্পিলু তুয়া পদে নন্দ কিশোর Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Gaur Premanande Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, I'm just fixing the mic.
Hare Krishna. We are very, very grateful to this Deena Bandhu Prabhu for accepting our request and agreeing to give us his wonderful association. Everybody knows His Grace Deena Bandhu Prabhu, but when we visit Vrindavan, we get to hear a wonderful and enlightening from his lotus mouth. Just a brief introduction. Prabhuji was appointed as the temple president in 1972 in Portland. There he preached for 5-6 years and inspired many souls to accept Krishna consciousness. In 1978, he moved to Miami, Florida, and in April of 1984, finally, he came to Sridham Vrindavan, and since more than 3 decades have passed, he is staying here as a Rajvasi, and all the Rajvasis know him, speak their language, and whenever devotees come from non-parikrama, they got the association of Prabhuji, who narrates them the wonderful pastimes of different pastime places of Radha Krishna. We are very, very fortunate to have his association, and let us express our gratitude to His Grace Deenabandhu Prabhu by chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra loudly. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Praise Deenabandhu Prabhu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Hare Krishna. So wonderful Radhe Shyam to all of you from Sri Vrindavan Dham, from the temple that Srila Prabhupada said is the beating heart of ISKCON. So today we're going to share some things in Krishna consciousness with you. We're very happy to be here with you all today. We hope that you all are safe. We're happily locked in with Krishna and Balaram, so we're doing fine. So to begin, we'll sing that song that Srila Prabhupada sang before his pravachan, Everywhere in the World. Beautiful song by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Banatyari Yamuna Tira Banatyari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Banatyari Yamuna Tira Banatyari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Soranandana Brajajanarandana Soranandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Banatyari Yamuna Tira Banatyari Yamuna Tira Banatyari Yamuna Tira Banatyari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Sri Sri Radha Madhava Ki. So again, we'd like to say we're very happy to be with you here all this morning. And we're broadcasting from the holy Sri Vrindavan Dham. So we share some things of Krishna consciousness with you. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dudati Savarandigam Aradhana Srinandandai Vidamya Che Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padambujo Dudlisyam Janma Janmani Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhumevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. So I was asked to speak a little bit about how I came to Krishna consciousness. So I was born in California, Los Angeles, California, the western coast of the United States of America, into a rather wealthy family. My father was a doctor. So America, doctor means he has so much money, even he doesn't know what to do with it all. So we had very nice house, we had nice cars, we had everything. We had a beautiful house overlooking the ocean. We could see the waves coming in and crashing on the rocks. We had our own swimming pool. We had everything. But still, despite having so many so-called conveniences, my heart was feeling empty. I did not feel any real happiness. My first really spiritual thought when I was 11 years old, my grandfather died. So then we all went to the mortuary to do the last viewing. And I remember thinking, why have we come here? My grandfather's not here. Because this is just a shell. My grandfather used to sit by the window in his rocking chair, smoking his smelly cigars and tell me wonderful stories. There's nobody here. I can understand the body was just a shell. That was the first time I had any spiritual thought. So later I went to the University of Notre Dame around 1967 or 8, I can't remember now. And we know the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s, that's when the students, they were protesting the war in Vietnam. They were rebelling against their parents' standards. Like I said, we had everything, but there was no happiness, and I couldn't understand what life was all about. You just go, you work hard, some little square office in some big tall skyscraper building in the middle of some nasty city. You stay there the whole day. You come home, you raise some children, then you grow old and you die. What is the point of all of it? I couldn't understand what was the point of all. This is what life is all about. So all the young people, we were rejecting these standards of our parents. We were rejecting the standards of the government. We were against the war in Vietnam. And we began to experiment. We began to understand that there's a whole new realm of consciousness that nobody's explored. Now the whole world has been explored, but nobody has explored the realms of consciousness. We began taking different types of intoxication, drugs. But despite the fact that we were headed in the 180 degrees in the wrong direction, we were after free love and free sex and free drugs, but our goal was try to find out what is the life all about. What is the meaning of life? This was our business. So I became frustrated in the university because I was studying, because I was thinking, when I went to university, I was studying sociology because I was thinking that I have everything. Let me help those who are unfortunate. But then when I was sociology, I was thinking that let me help make other people happy. But then I realized that I don't know what happiness is. I have everything, but I have no happiness. If I want to give happiness to others, then I have to have some to give myself. And I began to question, what is my sociology? I will help other people to get a better job so they can get a better education, so they can get a better job, so they can make more money and buy all the same things that didn't give me any happiness. I will make them just as frustrated as I am. I will make other people that frustrated. So it was a very crisis in my life. So I thought the university wasn't giving the knowledge that I wanted. I wanted to know what life was all about. So then we dropped out and joined the hippie movement, and although we were in the darkest of ignorance, our whole goal was somehow to find out what is the meaning of life. So a whole bunch of us from the university, we moved to the Lower East Side of New York. Unfortunately, we only saw the devotees, but we never went by. We heard about them. We knew they had Sunday feasts and everything. And I saw them one day. I was walking through Cooper Square, and I saw these people looked like they were wearing bed sheets, and they had these funny little tails coming out the back of their head, and they had these different instruments, and they were chanting this mantra that I had heard one day in the university. I bought one album by Allen Ginsberg, or had it featured on it. It was by Ed Sanders, if anybody remembers him, but probably not. But he had a group called the Fugs, F-U-G-S. So the name of the group was so obscene, I had to buy the album. And on the one cut, because I'm talking about records. Most of you probably don't know what records are. But on one of the cuts on the record was Allen Ginsberg chanting Hare Krishna. He chanted a very interesting melody. One time I heard even an old tape, if you remember tapes, of Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I used to find myself walking around chanting this mantra. I didn't know anything about it, what it was or anything, but I used to like to chant this mantra. And everybody knew it. Somehow in the hippie days, it became famous with all the young people. So we were living in New York, and eventually our idea was to move back to we saw how the city life was so artificial. We wanted to move back to the farm. So we went back to, we had met when we were in the University of Notre Dame, which is in South Bend, Indiana, and Bloomington, Indiana. The University of Indiana is there. We had met some nice people that also had the idea of starting some sort of a commune, go out on a farm and live naturally. So I went there. So things were, some of our friends had gotten an inheritance. They bought a farm. And while they were fixing it up, the summertime came. So that year, the main place to be, one of the main places to be besides Woodstock, was Boulder, Colorado. So we all hitchhiked out to Boulder, Colorado, and we were living in the mountains. And I was singing, and I was living in the mountains, and this is such a peaceful place, not like the city. I was singing, this is the heaven, this is the Swarga that the Vedas talk about, this is the Nirvana that the Buddhists, I was thinking this was the best place. And we would take some different, I had a good friend named Sunshine that didn't have anything to do with the sun. You'd have to grow up in that era to understand what sunshine was. And we would take drugs and we would speculate at the speed of mind. And we'd always come to the conclusion that it's beyond words. Or we go talking and talking and talking to finally we say there's nothing to be said, because we were always coming to the impersonal conclusion that God is the great white light and our goal is to merge into that great white light and become God ourselves. We had all these ideas in our heads. But we would feel frustrated because we've come to the conclusion that God's beyond words. Then why did you say that? If there's nothing to be said, then why did you say that? So somehow or other, although I decided that the Rocky Mountains was heaven, it had a certain drawback. At the end of the summer, it became very cold. So we came down to Boulder. And I was sitting in the park. There was a nice park where all the young people used to stay. And I'm cutting out a lot because it's a very long story. But anyway. Well, let me tell that part anyway. While we were still living in the mountains, we decided to go climb to this mountain peak. One friend of mine and I. So we were going through the mountains, and then we came to this big barbed wire fence. And it said, Boulder City watershed, trespassers will be prosecuted. Because there was a river there that went down that supplied water to the city, and they didn't want people bathing in that water because people are going to drink that water. But it was right in the straight line to get to the peak, was right in the way, right through this barbed wire fence. So since we were rebels, we just rebelled against authority. We went through the barbed wire fence. We found the river and we did exactly what they didn't want us to do. We immediately took our bath. We got to the other side of the river and we found that they had built a dam, and they cleared off all the trees and built this dam. So now we had no cover. So naturally the forest ranger found us and he brought us back to his ranger house and told, you guys are under arrest. And I was saying, how can we be under arrest? They said, you're trespassing. I said, I'm a child of God. This is my father's property. So how can I be trespassing? He said, I might well agree with you, but you're going to have to tell it to the judge. So he said, let me take my lunch and we're going down to the jail. So while I was doing it at lunch, we emptied out our pockets of certain things that we didn't want to get caught with the police with. He must have had some funny plants growing in his lawn the next time it rained. So we went down and they put us in the jail. And now all my philosophy fell apart. Because I was thinking, anyway, inside the jail, outside the jail, because our whole philosophy, it's all one. Inside the jail, outside the jail, it's all one. Huh? But I sure wish I was out of here. All our Mayavad philosophy was falling apart. And I said, no. He said, wait a minute. How can you be in anxiety? God can't be. You're God. We're all God. God can't be in anxiety, but I sure wish I was out of here. And I was doing anything to hope get out of this place. And we were singing Bob Dylan songs and so many things just to take our mind off the fact that we were stuck in jail. So suddenly I remembered that one girl had come into the park with her guitar and she was chanting Hare Krishna and playing the chords. So I began to pretend like I had a guitar and tried to remember the chords. And I began to sing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I was just chanting and chanting. I could hear everyone out in the TV room. They were all yelling, hey, shut up in there. And Hare Krishna. It just didn't matter. Inside the jail, outside the jail, just happy chanting Hare Krishna. Finally, our friends came and bailed us out. And then the next thing we knew, we came down from the mountain because it was too cold to stay there any longer. And we were sitting in that same park. And all of a sudden, I was chanting, playing my guitar, and I thought I was going to be the next Bob Dylan, but nobody was listening, so I was feeling very frustrated. Then all of a sudden, I saw Bhavananda walk into the park. And Bhavananda, he had quite a bit of hair, but he had a sika. It was very obvious. He was wearing yogi pants. He wasn't wearing a dhoti, but he had kurta on. And I thought, because when we walked in the park, somebody told us, the Hare Krishna people are here. And I said, oh, no, don't tell me they're here too. He said, yeah, they're going to start a temple here in Boulder. So I saw Bhavananda walk in. I said, here are these people that chant Hare Krishna. Let me find out what it's all about. So I put my guitar away, walked over, sat down. So he explained about the chanting. Then he chanted, because he was Bhavananda, he had to chant a very interesting melody. But since I was a musician, I was able to follow his melody very easily. So he was very pleased with me. He said, you chant very nicely. Then he was asking for questions, and somebody said, well, what about the peace movement? What about the war in Vietnam? And Bhavananda said, you all go to the peace march and you chant peace, peace, peace. And you eat hot dogs and hamburgers, which are the product of violence. When there's violence in your own life, how are you going to bring peace in the world? I said, wow, because living with all these hippies, I'd also become a vegetarian, more or less. And I said, yeah, that's really interesting. And then somebody asked him about astrology. And we were all into tarot cards, astrology, all these. We just wanted to know what life was all about. We wanted to know what the meaning of life. So somebody asked about astrology, and Bhavananda said, yes, this is a very subtle material science. You can understand many subtle things, interesting things about this material world through astrology, but it's still material. we're interested in spiritual science. I said, yeah, me too. I want to know spiritual science. Huh? So then it was going like that. Then this old green Ford, 1947 Ford pickup truck pulled up because that's all they had. And a girl got out. She was a Western girl, but she was dressed in a sari. That was Bhavananda's wife, Palika. And Bhavananda said, I'm very fallen, but here comes my wife. She's a saint. And I looked across the park and I saw an American girl with a sari on. Because we used to rip off all our clothes in the mountains. So to see a girl completely wrapped up in a sari, so chaste and so pure. And he says, there's a saint. I said, wow, a saint, you know? So we went back to the cabin and we got to the cabin. They weren't even staying in, some people had asked them to come because the devotees were looking for a place to start a temple. So these hippies had invited them to stay in their cabin outside of Boulder, 15 miles outside of Boulder. So we went out, drove out there in this old beat up pickup truck. We got there and one of the other devotees, she was so happy to see that someone come to hear about Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. She was dancing and she was saying something called Hari Bol, Hari Bol. I said, what is this all about? And I'd already heard from Bhavananda that these devotees, they don't take any drugs, they don't have illicit sex life, they don't have gambling and all these meat eating. I knew this girl is really high and she hasn't taken any drugs. What do these people have? Just so happened, next day was Janmashtami. So they were going to fast all day the next day. So they made this huge pot of halava. And I never heard of halava in my life. So I said, what's halava? And they pointed to a plate. And I immediately went to take some. I said, no, that was a silver plate. They said, no, that's Krishna's plate. We don't eat off of Krishna's plate. I said, Krishna's plate? I said, yeah, everything we eat, we offer first to God. So this is Krishna's plate. And I said, well, do something to it so we can eat it. It looks wonderful. So then they sat us on the floor. We were so poor in those days. Nowadays, it's all kaju and kishmish and like that. But those days were so poor. We didn't even have plates. They put wax paper. I don't even know what wax paper is, but they put 2 sheets of wax paper on the floor and they're passing out this halava. And I didn't know what it was, but the devotees sure did. And they were going, mercy, Prabhu, mercy. And I was going, wow, what is this halava? It must be heavy stuff. So they said their prayer and we took that halava. I never tasted anything like that. Especially in the old days, we used to make it with butter instead of ghee. And butter halava has a different taste. And they made so much because they're going to fast. They could give more and more and more. I was just amazed. What is this stuff? So the next day was Janmashtami. They were going to fast all day to midnight and have a 25-course vegetarian feast at midnight. Because those days we didn't know you're supposed to do Ekadasi breakfast. This was 1969. So all day I was talking with Bhavananda, and first thing I told Bhavananda is, Bhavananda, aren't we all God? And Bhavananda looked at me and said, oh, you are God? And how you have forgotten. And that blew my mind because we used to ask the same question. We'd speculate all night and we come to the conclusion, I'm God, you're God, we're all God. How did we miss it all this time? And I never understood the meaning of that question. He said, you are God and how you have forgotten. I said, that's right. How can I forget? And he began to preach about how we're a tiny part of God, but God is a supreme person. And the idea of God being a person had never even entered our brains when we were speculating at the speed of mind. We just thought God was a light or an energy. But it made so much sense. And I said, but Bhavananda, isn't all talking nonsense? He said, yes, unless you're talking about Krishna or you're chanting Hare Krishna. That is a spiritual vibration that will raise you to the transcendental platform. I said, wow. And he kept talking about in this material world how everything you do gets dull. You know, You start out very nice and it gets dull. He said, but in the spiritual sky, everything is always heightening. And he would move his hands like that because he knew exactly where I was at. He said, touch is always heightening. Taste is always heightening. Smell is always heightening. Sound is always heightening. And he'd go like that. And I would just go, huh? That's where I want to be, the spiritual world. Here is just birth, death, disease, and old age. There it's eternally getting better and better all the time. So finally they had this big feast. And I'd never seen, first I was a cook, so I was amazed. They rolled out these pieces of dough, completely flat as a piece of paper, and threw it into this wonderful liquid called ghee. I'd never heard of ghee, this golden liquid. And I watched that piece of dough blow up like a balloon. I said, this is magic cooking. Because I was a cook before I was a devotee, so I thought, this is amazing. And then we had puris and sweet rice and halava and paneer sabji and so many things. And Bhavananda was sitting in front of me and he picked up this dark brown sweet gulab jamun. In those days, the law was that you soak them for 3 days before you offer them to Krishna. So this was a heavy duty gulab jamun. He said, "I eat this?" And I said, "Nope." And he picked up the gulab jamun in his plate, threw the whole thing in his mouth. Bloop. And I thought, if he can do it, I can do it. So I picked up that gulab jamun and I threw the whole thing in my mouth, and all this sugar juice started coming out. And I thought it was never going to end. I thought, we made it. I'm in the spiritual world. We got to Goloka Vrindavan. And there was so much prasadam and nobody came because they were way out. They were 20, 30 kilometers outside of Boulder. So nobody had car. Nobody had any way to get there. But they made this big feast. They kept saying, this is spiritual food. You have to take more. You have to take more. You have to take more. So finally I was just leaning against the wall and chanting Hare Krishna because I couldn't do anything else. My stomach hurt, but it was just so blissful. And my mind was thinking that this is it. As soon as you walk out that door, there's birth, death, disease, and old age. And here, chanting, dancing, and feasting, and the absolute truth is revealed to you, and you'll reach the life of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. There's not even a choice whether to become a devotee or not. I just leaned back and right then and there decided I'm going to become a devotee. And they keep feeding me this nice food and I'm still here. So that's the short version of it. It's a very long version. There's a lot of things and a lot of philosophical questions were there. But that's basically how I became a devotee. Now I'll tell you about, because we were in Boulder, there was temples on the East Coast, there were temples on the West Coast. Now we were in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. So eventually Prabhupada came to LA, so they sent me to LA to get initiated. Because Prabhupada was out of the country, he was in India. So when he came to LA, then they sent me to LA to get initiated. So this was the old temple on La Cienega Boulevard, not Huasteca where we have now, the temple before. So in that temple, there was no place for Prabhupada to stay. So they rented a flat nearby. Prabhupada came for greeting of the deities and Bhagavatam class, then Kirtan. Always after Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada did Hare Krishna Kirtan. We don't do anymore, but that's what we did. So, and then he went back to his flat and he wouldn't come to the next day. So we got there a little bit after noontime. We drove all the way. So we weren't going to see Prabhupada till the next day. But it was Saturday night. So Saturday nights we used to go to Hollywood Boulevard and chant. Now America, if chanting on the God's names on the streets is a religion, then the police can't stop you. But if you block traffic, then they'll catch you on that one. So there was a place in Hollywood Boulevard where there was a big triangle-shaped space in front of the door to a certain restaurant called Diamond Jim's. We don't want to talk about what they serve there. You can just imagine, or don't imagine. So we could keep people in that triangular space and the sidewalk remained free. The police were happy, we were happy. Only Diamond Jim's was unhappy with us chanting out in front of their restaurant all night. So, and we had a wonderful devotee named Ujjain Maharaj. He was probably brahmachari at the time. And Prabhupada said he will sing his way back to Golok. He had such a celestial voice. And he chanted Hare Krishna with so much devotion. And we had our Hollywood raga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Mr. John would play so fast. He said, we don't want to leave any gaps for Maya to enter. So we all had our backs to the street. He had us in a half circle. He said, just like Krishna's eye. And he was standing at the end. He can see the street. He can see the sidewalk both because he's standing straight down, looking down this curved line. He was chanting and chanting in ecstasy. Suddenly, Vishnujan's eyes got big like saucers. And he said, Prabhu. Now, we were facing toward the sidewalk, toward the restaurant. We couldn't see anything in front of us that would make him do like that. So it must be something behind us. So I told this story in Vrindavan one time, and Gargamuni was there. And he told me, yes, that particular night, Prabhupada asked me to take him to see the devotees spreading the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this horrible place called Hollywood. So just that particular night. So we all turned around and there was Prabhupada, there was a little Ford Admiral. Now you all know Mustang and so many different types of Fords. You don't even, now you can know how old I am. You don't even remember Admiral. But Prabhupada was a little Ford Admiral. And the pure devotee of the Lord was we could see him in the window. He had his hand in his bead bag and he was making pranams to us. And I was thinking, my goodness, here's the pure devotee of the Lord making, we were all embarrassed. We wanted to peel up the sidewalk and crawl underneath the cement. We were embarrassed. But Prabhupada was so grateful. This was Prabhupada. He was so grateful that in this horrible place called Hollywood Boulevard, we were pushing on the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. He was offering obeisances to us. We were just embarrassed. So we all hit the street. But that was the first time that we met Srila Prabhupada. So next day was my initiation. It was Sunday. And this was one of the last initiation ceremonies where Prabhupada did everything himself. Because later he would chant on the beads in his room and then they would just hang them on the microphone and hand them out. But he chanted on each japamala in front of us. Somebody else did the fire sacrifice. Prabhupada just sat and gave a lecture. But this time he did the fire sacrifice. He chanted on the beads. He did everything. So there was about 10 of us to get initiated. So it took quite a while. But right in front of us, Prabhupada chanted on our beads. And I saw, in those days, it wasn't that you went to the temple store and you bought some nice japamala from Loi Bazaar. We had to go buy some wooden beads at the handicraft shop and string them ourselves. We had to string our beads. You can't imagine how much string it takes when you put one bead on and pull it all the way through and tie a knot, chant Hare Krishna on each knot. after you tie 108 knots, that string just disappears. So these beautiful white colored, shiny white japa beads, handicraft beads. So I handed them to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's beautiful lotus fingers looked like a string of pearls. And I watched carefully how he chanted. He would chant like this: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Then he'd roll like this: Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. After 50 years, I still chant like that. So Prabhupada chanted the round, and he handed me the beads and asked, how many rounds? I said 16, and said, what are the 4 rules and regulations? I said, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex life. Then my mind went completely blank. Then I completely froze. I couldn't think at all. And I was just sitting there. Some brahmachari behind me whispered behind me, no drugs, no drugs. Then I said, oh yeah, no intoxication. And Prabhupada smiled and said, yes, no LSD. And then he laughs at his own joke. It was so sweet. Prabhupada was laughing at his own joke. So then he said, your name is Deena Bandhu. And I guess I still had this shocked look on my face from forgetting the 4th regulative principle. So Prabhupada looked at me. I must have some funny look on my face. He said, it is all right? Oh, yes, Prabhupada. Oh, yes, Prabhupada. He said, Deena Bandhu means friend of the humble. And then he gave me my beads. Then Prabhupada drew the designs on the fire jug himself. He lit the fire, he did the fire jug, he did everything. Then he got up on the Vyasasana, he right then and there, before the fire jug, he gave the lecture. And I remember very clearly, he told one little Bengali verse. He told us, you take advantage of this chanting of Hare Krishna, you'll become perfect. Because Krishna consciousness is the perfection of life. It doesn't matter what your situation is. If you chant Hare Krishna, you'll become perfect. And he said, Suchi hoy, muchi hoy, jari Krishna tyaje. He said, there are 2 things. One is muchi. Muchi means the cobbler, dealer in skin, animal skin. That is the lowest down. And one is suchi. Suchi means Brahman, clean. But even if you are suchi, Brahman, and tyaja, you have given up Krishna consciousness, or you have no Krishna consciousness, you immediately become muchi, the lowest. But even if you're muchi hoy, suchi hoy, jari Krishna bhaje. But even if you're muchi, lowest down person, jari Krishna bhaje, if you chant Hare Krishna, if you worship Krishna, suchi hoy, you become suchi, highest. So Prabhu said, take advantage of this Bengali proverb, chant Hare Krishna and make your life perfect. And then he did fire jagga. After fire jagga, he climbed on his Vyasasan, very tall Vyasasan, and he began to do kirtan. And because I had become devotee because of Bhavananda, so in those days also we didn't have dhotis from Loy Bazaar either. We just went to J.C. Penney's or Walmart's and we bought peach colored cloth and cut it up in pieces. And so Bhavananda, he had to get the nice, shiniest, silkiest looking cloth because he was Bhavananda from Hollywood. So this very silky, shiny dhoti. And I was jumping up and down and suddenly I felt it coming undone. So immediately I just grabbed my dhoti like this and was just there in front of Prabhupada chanting. Then after the kirtan in the old Lasiyanaga temple, there was a temple room. There was a little room on the side where Prabhupada took prasadam. And we all went in the prasad hall. Then he said, Prabhupada is leaving. So when Prabhupada would leave, we'd all line up on the walkway. And Prabhupada would come with his bead bag. And we were just like little puppy dogs sitting, kneeling on either side of the walkway. Just waiting for Prabhupada. And with his bead bag, he would touch somebody on the head on this side, touch one on this side. So because he was walking, when he went to the other side, he would miss someone. So Prabhupada dropped his bead on my head, gave me his blessing. And opposite me, I was also getting initiated with Jayatitha. He missed Jayatitha. So Jayatitha ran and got in line again. Second time he got in this. He was so upset. Then Prabhupada left and went back. So this is how, a little bit how I became Krishna conscious. So when Prabhupada left this world, unfortunately, I didn't come here to Vrindavan because we couldn't imagine life without Prabhupada. We never thought that Prabhupada would always be with us. The astrologer promised that he would live to 100. He said there'd be a difficult period. If he gets through that, he'll live to 100. So we couldn't believe it. I never went. But I remember the day we heard, it was just like a thunderbolt hit my heart. I was just shocked. I ran up to the temple president's room. He was sprawled on his desk and just sobbing like a baby. So then I knew the news was true. I just went home and I chanted and chanted and chanted. And I could feel that Maha Mantra going up to Prabhupada. So we know how you all feel. But anyway, Prabhupada always said, I didn't come here to thousands of miles to have someone cook or wash my laundry. The main thing is to serve the instruction of the spiritual master. We always hear about getting the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. But actually getting the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master doesn't mean just touching his feet. Because we're in the modern age, we're in the internet age, where we just want to click on the link and everything happens. Devotees always ask me, how can I get rid of lust? How can I become pure? How can I develop Krishna? We just want the button, we want the link that we can click on. Bing, lust is gone from our heart. Bing, greed is gone from our heart. But there's no link. It's not touching the foot button that everything will happen. Getting the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee means following his instructions. Just like Prabhupada himself said, I never felt separation from my spiritual master because I was always following his instruction. So, of course, it was very difficult times. Devotees were trying their best. The new gurus were trying their best, but of course we made lots of mistakes. I also left active temple service, got a job. But then a wonderful godbrother, because he knew I was an expert preacher. I was in Miami at that time. And he was preaching, and his name was, that time was Alana Swami, now he's known as Paramadwaiti Maharaj. And he saw that I was just wasting my life in householder life, that I was actually meant to be a preacher. But those days, Prabhupada disciples, we were considered troublemakers, so I was living outside the temple. But he saw that in South America, everything was very simple. He said, they don't even know how to play kartals. You have to come. They need your preaching there. Why are you wasting your time? So out of his kindness, he took me to South America, where I got back into full-time preaching, which is our life and soul. So that's why we don't really, once you're involved in preaching, which is Prabhupada's desire, and fulfilling the order of the spiritual master, then you don't notice Prabhupada's separation so much. So that you just have to become absorbed in your service. Because Prabhupada said, I didn't come just to have somebody cook and wash my cloth. He came to have spread this Krishna consciousness. In the old days, practically our temple life meant we just went in the morning, in the late morning, we go downtown and chant Hare Krishna all day. And then the evening we go to, of course we had those days, Bhagavad Gita class was Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And the other nights we would go out and chant. So practically all we did was Harinam Sankirtan. Morning time downtown and evening time either Sunset Boulevard or Hollywood Boulevard. It was so blissful, just chanting and chanting. Spreading Krishna consciousness, our life and soul. I guarantee you, if you cooperate together, you have such a wonderful project there in Ujjain. I was thinking the other day, Prabhupada gave such a wonderful name to Maharaj, Bhakti Charu. Charu in English means charming. And everything about Maharaj is charming. His smile was charming. His speaking was charming. His way of dealing with others was charming. Everything was charu. His service was charming, because we know that the most dear thing to Srila Prabhupada is book distribution. And Prabhupada was so happy to get an intelligent, educated, not just Indian, but Bengali. Because Prabhupada was always pushing. He tried so hard in India to try to get people to take Krishna conscious. And then he gave up and said, let me go get the Americans to become Krishna conscious. Everyone follows them, so they'll follow the Americans and become Krishna conscious. So now Prabhupada had a very nice, cultured, well-educated, educated in the West even, Bengali boy. This was a jewel for Srila Prabhupada. And he told him first service was very charming. You translate my books into Bengali, Prabhupada's own mother tongue. And even he did one very charming service that Prabhupada didn't ask him, but we know Prabhupada had translated, not translated, but he'd written a Bengali verse, parody of, not parody, that's the word, but anyway, Gitar Gan. Poem, Gitar Gan. So without telling Prabhupada, he got it, he edited it, he published it, printed it, and then he brought a copy to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was so happy. Until today, I think this is still in Bengal one of the favorite books to distribute, Gitar Gan. So that was also very charming. And in Ujjain, he built a very charming white marble temple with the most charming deities of Radha Madan Mohan and charming deities of Krishna Balaram. And his cooking was also charming. Everything about him was charming. Prabhupada named him perfectly, Bhakti Charu. His bhakti was charming. Everything about him was charming. So you have a great responsibility now to carry on what he's done. He was one of the main pillars, although he joined very late. I joined in 69. I haven't even done 1/100th of what Maharaj has done. He became one of the main pillars of our Krishna conscious movement. He was a jewel in Prabhupada's collection of valuable jewels. So it is your duty now to cooperate together and carry on the legacy that Maharaj has given you, to cooperate and serve the mission of Srila Prabhupada. And as Maharaj again and again said, don't matter what happens, because the material world will never find perfection. Even in a spiritual movement, there's so many ups and downs and difficulties. He said, but don't ever leave ISKCON. So, and by serving Prabhupada's mission, you will always feel yourself packed up with Bhakti Charu Maharaj. You'll never feel the separation. You'll go on, just continue preaching and preaching. This is our life. So there's a few minutes left. Maybe we have some, Arjun can relay the questions if anybody has any question. I don't have a earphone. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any questions?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for explaining that how by serving Srila Prabhupada's mission, we will not feel separation from His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And also you mentioned that Srila Prabhupada said that I didn't come here that somebody should cook for me and wash clothes. I came to spread Krishna consciousness. But at the same time, we see many devotees have this desire to serve spiritual master in Vapu form. And when such thing happens, they become, they become very broken-hearted. So, will you kindly explain something that how we can deeply take this mood of serving the Vani of a spiritual master?
The question is that many disciples has the desire to serve the Bandhu of the spiritual master. Once the spiritual master departs, then how they can keep it within their heart to follow the instruction of the spiritual master. Those who have the intense desire to serve the Bandhu of the spiritual master, fortunate, how can they follow the instruction of the master?
That's why Prabhupada made this ISKCON society. So we have society means a whole group of people together. So we're all meant to help each other. That is why I'm emphasizing you all cooperate together to carry on the legacy. Because in the material world, we become envious. If somebody's better than us, we envy them and criticize them. If somebody's equal, we fight with them. If somebody's lower than us, we crush them. But spiritual life means if someone is lower, we try to bring them up. If someone is equal, we try to make friends with them. And if someone is higher, we admire them and get inspired by them. So in this way, we have a whole society. We take inspiration. We should inspire each other to push on this movement of Srila Prabhupada. The real trick is to see the spiritual master in everyone. So Prabhupada has created this society. We all cooperate together and inspire each other to spread Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada always gave the example of the sticks. We have one stick, very easy to break. But you put all those very thin sticks, they're so easy to break. You put them all together, it's hard to break them. So we must band together, take inspiration from each other, help one another, just like Paramandweti Maharaj helped me in Krishna consciousness. I'm eternally indebted to him. So we help each other in Krishna consciousness. That's how you maintain your enthusiasm.
The question came, you can repeat the question. Why we don't have same enthusiasm as we had earlier? Generally, we ask this question. You can repeat the question.
Why we don't have?
Same enthusiasm as
I don't know. I see.
Repeat the question.
Why we don't have the same enthusiasm as devotees previously. But I don't know, I see so many second generation devotees doing so much wonderful service who never even had Prabhupada's association. Even you see your own spiritual master. Some of us were with him for 10, 11, 12 years. And Bhakti Charu was just there that last year. So, like I said, we have to inspire one another. That's the trick. And of course, Prabhupada was one of those very rare souls that we'll hardly ever see. So there was just Prabhupada came in the room, there was special magic. So if we continue to serve and continue to preach, main thing is preaching. If we just lose the spirit of preaching, just be content to push our pen on the desk, especially losing Harinam. We must revive Harinam all over the world. That will bring back the enthusiasm.
Hare Krishna. There are not further questions. We are very grateful to you, Prabhuji, for giving your wonderful association and telling us that if we inspire each other and continue to serve and preach, then we will not feel the separation from Srila Prabhupada or from our spiritual master. And in this way, we will be always be having or feeling his mercy. So we beg for your blessing so that we can continue to serve in cooperation in this glorious movement of Srila Prabhupada. And we express our gratitude to you. Let us express our gratitude to His Grace Deena Prabhu by loudly chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra with raised hands. Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Praise Dinabandhu Prabhu ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Ananta Koti Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki,
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Hare.